This is Anthony Warnick from the United States. He's one of our residency artists in the One Artist a Week residency program of FaveLAB. And we want to ask him some questions about his work and about the residency. Anthony, please first tell us, where do you live and work at this moment?
I live and work in Manhattan, Kansas, which is right in the middle of the United States.
And you told us that you have a lot of residency experience and you've been traveling. Which were the highlights of the residencies you've been visiting?
I would say I think the highlight would probably be Soma, which is a residency in Mexico City. Usually takes place over a summer, and it's focused on critical theory and conversation, and more of a seminar sort of model. So there would be 20 artists or so at a time. You have readings and do studio visits and visit sort of museums and galleries and places around a specific subject. Each summer it'll have a different sort of theme, and that sort of is what brings the group together.
Did you make residencies also abroad, in Europe or in other continents?
I've done residencies in Australia, outside of the United States, and I've done a number inside of the United States, but this is my first residency in Europe.
Your work is basically about politics and reference to the, I would say, democratic state and its institutions. What is your main focus? Which kind of issues are you working on?
So I would say overall the sort of bigger sort of body of work that I'm currently working on is all about democracy, and lots of it goes back to sort of what are the ideals of a democracy, or what should be the ideals of a democracy, and then how does that connect to how we currently sort of operate in what we sort of call democracies in the West.
Your work is critical inside and, I would say, against certain institutions. Do you think art can influence political processes, or a kind of a, let's say, political education of each citizen?
Yeah, I would say I think art is one of the things that's part of a sort of broader sort of cultural conversation. It is how I think lots of citizens are educated, and art, I think, is special in some ways in that it is allowable to ask sort of experimental and broader questions that we might not be asking in some of our more controlled disciplines like economics or sociology or something. And I think that for me is one of the things that I sort of enjoy about art and its connection to sort of culture, is how it is a spot where you can have broader conversations.
For you personally, where can art reach its most potential? So I'm asking, where, in which places, in your opinion, art can have the most impact on people to function as an agent?
It's a complicated question. I think that for me, the most important sort of piece that determines if a spot or a location can be impactful is the accessibility of that spot. I think one thing I really like about contemporary art is especially the art that is being made pre-canon, or before sort of it's been really heavily sort of canonized, is almost always free for the public to see.
How was your residency experience in Athens in view of your political work about democracy? Did it change anything in the way you would consider your work as a political agent?
Compelling to be in a location where the sort of history of some of these conversations goes back thousands of years. In the United States, the conversations go back maybe 500 years, maybe a little bit more than that for coordination, but most of our conversations about democracy are usually a lot more focused on the contemporary.
What do you think is the difference if you look at the United States and Greece in the conception of democracy in view of the historical developments?
I think that there's a sort of longer historic sort of conversation about it here, but I think that especially when you're talking about very contemporary moments, I think there's a similar sort of disenfranchisement and a frustration. But one thing that has been good for contextualizing my work here is that connection to the sort of historic examples. There are some in the Americas, like the coordination, but most of the conversation about democracy is a lot more sort of contemporary or sort of recent.
Let me ask you about now we talk about the 1 artist a week, which has been 1+1, but the 2 weeks residency, does it allow you enough time and space to research and create work, or would you wish to have a different format?
Okay, I think for me, it sort of depends on what type of project I'm working on. What I sort of ended up working on here, I think, was something where the 2 weeks was a very nice amount of time to turn out sort of a number of works. But those are things that had been researched and ideated and maybe thought about sort of well before arriving.
Did this residency inspire you to, let's say, go on in a certain direction?
Yeah, I think that both the reading and sort of historical sites I visited here definitely encouraged me to keep going in the direction that I have been working, which is the connection between language and democracy and sort of language and politics. So I think that I know is something that I'll continue on for at least a number of years. I think it's a body of work that is going to be sort of fruitful for a while.